your team actually, on a lot of people's boards, did the best in the draft. Your thoughts for the Pittsburgh Steelers first round pick?
Yeah, so they took Troy Fautano, offensive tackle out of Washington, and he was the number 3 overall tackle on my board. I only had Olu Fashino and Joe Alt above him on my board, and he was actually my number 1 draft target for the Steelers heading into the night. He was kind of my best case scenario, and the Steelers were actually reportedly trying to move up for him, and he ends up just falling to them at their selection. So that worked out great for them, and it looks like they're going to play him actually at right tackle. It looks like they're going to move Broderick Jones back over to the left side where he played in college. And it looks like the offensive line is really starting to shape up here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you mentioned at the end of the last time we had you on, you some interesting quarterback takes with this draft. So what are those quarterback takes, and has it changed with the landing spots that they ended up in?
So it was interesting, right? Because I think everyone was shocked with the Michael Penix selection there at number 8, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, what the hell are we doing? We just paid Kirk Cousins $100 million. Now we're bringing in a new franchise quarterback in Penix." So that was interesting to me. I actually had Penix ranked 4th on my rankings this year of quarterbacks based on my film study and what I did pre-draft. I just thought Penix because it's just a little bit better than J.J. McCarthy personally. I thought McCarthy had some accuracy issues, particularly down the field and throwing to his left. I thought Penix could make some really, really difficult throws down the field. And you could see rotating safeties, all these different things you want to see franchise quarterbacks do. Now, Penix doesn't really create much for you outside of structure, and that's kind of what you see from superstar quarterbacks nowadays. So I think Penix is actually kind of more like a Tua, where if you put the right offense around him, the right weapons, he can be a very functional starting quarterback in the National Football League. But I think Penix is somebody that is probably never going to be a superstar, but is going to be pretty darn good. But I really wish he would have gone to a place where he had a chance to play relatively early in his career. But there with Atlanta, it seems like he's not going to get a chance for at least the first 2 years of his career.
Jack, we look at what Pittsburgh did in the 7 rounds in the draft, and they, like a lot of teams, went after offensive linemen. Rebuilding the line, they went in the first round for an offensive lineman. In the second round, they went for an offensive lineman. And then all the way in the 6th round, no, I'm sorry, not in the 6th round. In the 4th round, they went for an offensive lineman. Are you surprised that obviously Pittsburgh is trying to rebuild their offensive line, and why?
No, I'm not surprised whatsoever. Arthur Smith, their new offensive coordinator, he preaches physicality up front along the offensive line. And really, his offense really centers around the run game and protecting the quarterback. So if you can't do those two things are going to start crumbling under your feet really quickly. It's kind of what happened there with Atlanta a little bit. And I think that Mason McCormick, who they ended up drafting in the 4th round, a guard out of South Dakota State, somebody I was very high on. And, he played a lower level of competition there with the Jackrabbits. But he was dominant against the competition he went up against. I'm interested to see how he does in the preseason when he goes up against some of the best in the world here in the National Football League. But I think he might be their long-term plan at right guard. James Daniels, who's currently their right guard there in Pittsburgh, is on the final year of his contract. So I think that they might prefer to let him walk in free agency next year instead of paying big money to an offensive guard. Might want to spend that money on a quarterback, either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. We can talk about those two again if you guys want. But I do think that the Steelers have a very good offensive line right now, and they're actually injury-proof along the offensive line because you got Dan Moore Jr., who started at left tackle for them last year. He's going to be their swing tackle. So you got a swing tackle with lots of starting experience. Then Mason McCormick is somebody that I think is one of the best backup guards heading into the league, and he can play center as well. So I'm really excited about that. And then also Zach Frazier, who they drafted in the 2nd round, their center out of West Virginia. He's just a mauler, man. He's obviously Pittsburgh has a tradition of really good center play. And I think Frazier, being a former wrestler, super physical on tape, he's going to fit right in with the Steelers culture.
A lot of our guys on our draft panel were saying this. Frazier was one of the steals of the 2nd round of any team, and he definitely could make an instant impact right there. And the Steelers, they have a great history of centers, so that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask about their 3rd round pick, though, Roman Wilson, another guy that a lot of both fantasy and draft analysts like. What do you think about the fit for him in Pittsburgh?
So it's interesting because right now, I kind of figured the Steelers would go out and get another wide receiver because you have George Pickens on the outside. He's your true number one receiver heading into the year. And a lot of people kind of tabbed Roman Wilson as like a true slot wide receiver. He's a little bit smaller, but he's really good on those crossing routes from the slot. That's what Michigan did with him a lot, and he was fantastic at that. But I think right now the Steelers' plan for him might be to be the true Deontay Johnson replacement at the Z spot because you got George Pickens, who's a really good X receiver. You still need that true route runner on the other side, on the outside. And I think Roman Wilson's a really polished route runner. Now, is he going to be able to handle press? I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But I know the Steelers are very high on Roman Wilson. I was really high on him coming out. He's a really good run blocker, too. So that's going to fit what Pittsburgh wants to do here with Arthur Smith. And, they want their wide receivers to run block. And one of the things I loved from Roman Wilson in the pre-draft process is he said his philosophy when it comes to run blocking is no block, no rock. So, I mean, I absolutely love that philosophy there from Roman. I think he's going to be a really good player, and I'm excited to see him in a Steelers uniform.
We are talking to Chat Sports Steelers and NFL analyst Jack Sperry. Now, Jack, you look at what the Steelers did, but the Bengals, some people said, did pretty well in the draft. Also, the Baltimore Ravens. What were your thoughts of both those teams' drafts as well of your, kind of comparing them to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, obviously, as a Steelers fan, I'm going to say we blowed those guys out of the water. But at the end of the day, being objective here, I mean, obviously Cincinnati and Baltimore had pretty darn good drafts in their own right, and I think that Baltimore was definitely a team after losing guys like Patrick Queen and losing some of these players in free agency, they needed to replenish some spots on their roster for sure. And, I think that the Ravens are a team that's just going to be super dangerous heading into next year, man, with all the young talent they still have on the roster. Obviously, they have Lamar locked up long term. And then with the Bengals getting Joey B back, hopefully fully healthy. If there's some reports out there that he's not actually fully healthy right now. But it's going to be interesting to see how this AFC North kind of plays out here for 2024. I think it's probably the most intriguing division in football, if you'd have to ask me.
So one of the most intriguing picks from another team was the Raiders taking Brock Bowers, number 13. A lot of people were thinking, Brock Bowers could go top 10, but then he goes to a team that just drafted a tight end last year and still has a question mark at quarterback. What are your thoughts to that?
Sense.
I think it's interesting. Brock Bowers is a very let's just say explosive offensive weapon. You can use him in a lot of different ways, and having to deal with the size of Devontae Adams and then also the size of Brock Bowers, who I actually think is probably going to be more of their true slot receiver, kind of in the way that I think Atlanta's going to use Kyle Pitts this year, where they're just kind of like big slot receivers, and that's what Brock Bowers does best. Is he's such an explosive player, especially after the catch at his size. So I heard some reports out there that the Raiders were doing like some sort of coin flip business with Brock Bowers or terrion Arnold, and if that's the case, that's just a terrible way to run your football team. But Bowers is a good player. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, they had a need at quarterback, even though all 6 of the quarterbacks were off the board at that point. Unless they were going to take Rattler, which was never going to happen at pick 13. I think they should have gone corner, personally. Bowers is an interesting fit, though. I'm interested to see the ways that offensive coordinator Luke Getsy uses him in his scheme.